with Advocate Menzi Simelane, who made some complaints around how the NPA at the time was dealing with plea bargains. And if my notes are correct, you indicated that Advocate Menzi Simelane was of the view that some of the perpetrators should have been given plea bargains in order to assist them to testify against other accused. Now, if that recollection is correct, then I must put it to you that that's not what plea bargains are designed to do. A plea and sentence agreement is in fact an agreement between the accused and the state as approved by the court. They're not then required to testify against other accused. There's a separate section dealing with that section 204, which does allow for state witnesses to give testimony in exchange for immunity if they testify honestly. Do you accept that?
I accept that, and I must repeat what I said, that I wish that I shouldn't be requested to elaborate on what it is that we're talking about. It was by way of making an example, and I can assure the Commission that the matter we're talking about had absolutely nothing to do with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Absolutely nothing.
And later in your oral evidence, you mentioned that prosecutions against senior figures in government, which might require them to step down from office, could paralyze government. And when you were asked, I believe, by Commissioner Gabriel whether that was an academic notion or a real threat, you said it was in fact an actual threat. So what I wish to put to you is, given that it was an actual threat, surely that then adds to the assertion that the families make, and that this threat did feed into the concerns held by government and help to shape their approach to these cases.
Commissioners, the matter arose somewhat differently. Whether or not prosecuting, and as an example, the 37 members of the ANC would constitute a threat to national security. And the point I made was that theoretically, if you were to prosecute, as an example, if you make an allegation against a sitting president with a view to prosecute, it would stand to reason that that president would have to step down and leave the office of president for very, very obvious reasons. Now, why was this? This was not canvassed by me to suggest that this was an anxiety that would have caused government to interfere with prosecutions. I restate that I'm unaware of an instance where government interfered. The point made earlier about Minister Mabandla corresponding with Advocate Ramaite was unknown to me. The point about it is, theoretically, you can have a scenario where, suppose theoretically, you mount a prosecution against a president and several ministers on account of them, in this particular example, having been members of the National Executive Committee of the ANC. You can paralyze government. Particularly where you can so mount such a prosecution with a within reasonable bounds that in fact there might be no successful prosecution, and that is very, very possible. So in that case, yes, that would undermine, that would cause a president, but it has no bearing. I restate the points I made earlier, that I'm unaware of investigations, I'm unaware of dockets that were referred to the NPA for prosecutions, and I remain convinced that no such an anxiety existed based on any facts.
Right. Well, on that score, I'm sure you're aware that we will be submitting to the Commission that there was this anxiety. May I refer you to what you said in relation to your role on the interdepartmental task team? You had an exchange with Advocate Seme, that you attended the constitutive meeting, and you said the following. It wasn't clear to me whether it was about the ITT or other meetings. You stated, "Now, I have just said I attended many meetings. Does that mean I was operational? No. But I was close enough to know what works and what does not work." Can you explain what you meant by saying I was close enough to know what works and what does not work?
Commissioners, this arose when I was making an example about a visit I was a part of to the borderline between South Africa and Mozambique, where on a particular day of the weekend, I don't know which week it is, the same community is separated by a fence. Now Mozambicans on the other side and South Africans this side, and there's a market day, and they trade on all manner of goods, tobacco, alcohol, small animals, goats, etc., etc., with the borderline at the time being patrolled jointly by members of the South African Police Services and the South African National Defence Force. And adjacent to that specific area, there were reports that syndicates or members of criminal syndicates from Mozambique would steal sports utility vehicles from the South African side and simply speed into the fence and drive into Mozambique with such. And the legal system on the other side of the fence made it almost impossible for such vehicles to be repatriated back to South Africa. So considering all the facts around managing security along the borderline, I would know what works and what doesn't work. That arose in that context. Now, you can extrapolate and say what I was suggesting, which is true, is that in respect to quite a wide range of other issues within the purview of the JCPS, I would know what works and what doesn't work. Simply because and this is not just true of Loyiso Jafta, it is true of the other colleagues in the policy unit who were responsible for the other clusters, because you needed to keep your finger on the pulse of what it is that works and what it is that doesn't work. and that arises from the monitoring and evaluation function of the policy unit.
So yes, I recall that exchange. It was actually in a response. It was a question that Advocate Sema put to you after you had said that you were involved in lots of task teams, not just this one. And she said yes, but you did not get involved in every instance of crime. And then you gave the example of the issues that arose on the Mozambican border. So yes, and that's obviously a very legitimate exercise to try and work out what will address those issues, what will work, what will not. But I want to put it to you that that kind of work is very different to a task team that involves itself on a case-by-case basis, as the interdepartmental task team did. And in fact, there was a point where the representatives from SAPS and NIA insisted that before the NDPP could act in any case, he would need to wait for a recommendation from the task team and indeed the DG's forum. Would you agree that there's a big distinction between that example and the task teams that deal with issues that arise, for example, on the Mozambican border?
Absolutely. But commissioners, I would also want to, and I'm not nitpicking here, please don't misunderstand me. The reference to NIA and the police asserting that they would have to advise the NDPP, actually in the minute that was referred to earlier, that in the minute that ascribes that matter to have been raised by a member of the Directorate of Special Operations, DSO, and not NIA or SAPS. But the commission can go back to the minute. But my recollection is that that matter, in principle, I agree, it is wrong. But factually, at least as far as the minute is concerned, that matter was raised by a member of the DSO and not a member of either the police or the... It's just that I don't want to distract the commission, but that matter was raised by a member of the DSO.
Yes, Mr. Jafta, can I suggest we don't go into it, because we're not relying on that minute to make that assertion. There's other documentation, and indeed there is a letter to that effect addressed from the then Commissioner of Police, Salebi, to the NDPP, setting that out, which then caused a crisis, because that was a bridge too far for then NDP Pikoli. It then caused him to write a memorandum to the Minister of Justice, setting out his concerns that his office, the independence of his office, was being undermined. If you like, I can find those documents to put to you, but did you accept my word that is in fact what happened?
Commissioners, I've just stated that in principle that would be wrong, whether it is by the late Commissioner Salebi or by the member of the TSO. In principle, that would be wrong in law.